सर स्टार्ट कर दिया तो हेलो हेलो सर लाइन अच्छी ना
Shall we start now?
सर स्टार्ट कर दिया तो
Sir. Okay, so in the last class we discussed about 109 paper, and within 109 we discussed about the introduction to early romantics. We discussed about James Thompson, Mark Akenside, also Joseph Wharton, William Collins, Thomas Gray, William Cowper, right? And also Robert Burns. We also talked about the use of folk song, themes, form, vocabulary, rhyme scheme of Robert Burns, right? And some of the love poems like Red, Red Rose and all. Okay. And also we talked about William Blake a little bit, including William Blake. We discussed about William Wordsworth, Wordsworth's theory of poetry, Wordsworth's practice of his theory, by the way, and Wordsworth's partnership with Coleridge. And we discussed a little bit about Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So here in this class, we'll be talking about Samuel Taylor Coleridge's contribution to British Romantic literature. All right, so we attempted a discussion on a fancy and imagination, right? And so far as the fancy is concerned, we discussed that fancy is aggregative and associative power, while we have imagination, which is shaping and modifying in nature. So imagination is shaping and modifying power, while fancy is aggregative and associative power. Okay. All right, now we will move on to Lord Byron. And Lord Byron is considered to be one of the second generation of romantic poets. So we discussed about the early romantics, also the middle one, the second generation romantic poets are Lord Byron, P.B. Shelley, John Keats. So these three important poets uh, come under the second generation of romantic poets. Lord Byron is from 1788 to 1824, and Byron's reputation as a poet and as a personality outside his own country was really, really immense. And he had influenced several French and German poets as well. So his life itself was like a romantic poem, and he is the hero of his poems, we can say. And the phrase Byronic hero has become an independent and critical term to describe a youthful, daring, passionate, cynical, moody, and rebellious figure. So Byronic hero can be termed as a hero who is quite youthful, quite daring, quite passionate, cynical, moody, and rebellious. So this type first appeared in a child Harold's Pilgrimage, a long poem which describes in Spenserian stanza a tour in which the hero contemplates on the decaying monuments of European civilization and on human achievement. So when we talk about Spenserian stanza, we are mentioning about sonnet. So we have two types of sonnet, by the way. So the first one is the first one follows the Spenserian stanza, while the second one follows the Shakespearean stanza. So we have two types of sonnets, Spenserian and Shakespearean, we can say. And also we call Spenserian one as Petrarchan one. Okay, so Byron describes the famous Colosseum in the following words. For example, I'm quoting the words, the lines: arches on arches, as it were that Rome, collecting the chief trophies of her line, would build up all her triumphs in one dome. Her Colosseum stands. An example of Byron's cynical view of history is given below, which is taken from uh, CV poem. There is the moral of all human tales. It's but the same rehearsal of the past. First freedom and then glory. When that fails, wealth, vice, corruption, barbarism at last. So Byron was unlike other romantic poets, except perhaps Shelley. Also, he did not have much respect for the others because of his aristocratic background. And Augustan wit and elegance suited his elitist tastes better than rustic life and common speech. And he had great admiration for Alexander Pope, unlike several romantic poets. And he felt that measured against the poetic practice of Pope, he and his contemporaries were all in the wrong, one as much as another. So we are open a wrong revolutionary poetical system or systems, not worth a damn in itself. And these are the quotations from him. Byron's forte is his verse satire, which is not surprising because of his admiration for Pope and other Augustan writers. Augustan writers means classical writers from 1700 to 1800. And Pope is one of the most important classical writers or Augustan writers. And we find out that Lord Byron used to follow Pope's writings because Pope is quite important one so far as writing verses in satire is concerned. So he had actually mocked the form of epic in the mock heroic epic, that is Rape of the Lock. That is why Pope is one of the most important idols, we can say, of Byron. So English bards and Scotch reviewers, published in 1809, written the popular Augustan verse form of the heroic couplet is brilliant. And Don Juan, written in Ottarima, is an unfinished satire, by the way. And it is described as a picaresque novel in verse in which a variety of themes, styles, and tones are used. Considered Byron's best, Don Juan is a criticism of life. Don Juan is also a work by Lord Byron, which is a criticism of life in general. And Goethe, the German writer and critic, he called it a work of a boundless genius. And Byron states his poetical preferences and prejudices in these lines. For example, he says, "Thou shalt believe in Milton, Dryden, Pope. Thou shalt not set up Wordsworth, Coleridge, Southey, because the first is crazed beyond all hope, the second drunk, the third so quaint and mouthy." With crab, it may be difficulty. It may be difficulty to cope. Hmm. These are the lines by Byron himself. And the tone of the poem is characteristic of Byron's verse satires. In Don Juan, he sought to depict life in the comic spirit, to strip off the tinsel of sentiment and illusion. And his other verse satires are Beppo and the Vision of Judgment. These are two of his most important satires, Beppo and the Vision of the Judgment. These are two of his most important satires, Byron satires. He also wrote two powerful dramas, Manfred and Cain. Russell Noyes says, by the measure of his titanic energy and his impassioned self assertion, Byron has given us a more potent expression of raw and naked humanity than all the romantic poets put together. So, Byron, in his Don Juan, you see, has provided a criticism of life. And according to Noyes, I mean, Russell Noyes, uh, Byron has given us a more potent expression of raw and naked humanity than all the romantic poets put together. So he is appreciating Byron as much as all the romantic poets put together. So he has given us masterly pictures of love, hate, patriotism, honor, disdain, revenge, remorse, despair, awe, mockery, everything, almost all the emotions he has touched open in Don Juan. That's why Russell Noyes uh, appreciates the contributions of Byron as a writer and poet. Now, moving on to Percy Bysshe Shelley, and Percy Bysshe Shelley is another important poet of the Romantic period, and he is quite famous for Adonais. He is quite famous for a defense of poetry, which is a critical masterpiece of Shelley. He is quite famous for the Four Ages of Poetry. He is quite famous for Ode to the West Wind, by the way. Ode to the West Wind, this particular poem, uh, is quite famous. Like Prometheus Unbound is one of the epics that he has attempted. Prometheus Unbound is another epic that he has attempted. All right, so Shelley had a very radical idea, and he was an idealist because he believed in these ideas. That mankind can be made perfect, tyranny can be abolished, and freedom can flourish in all walks of life. Like we had already talked about, French Revolution has really influenced all these poets and writers of the Romantic age. That's why Percy Bysshe Shelley is not an exception, and he has been inspired by and motivated by the French Revolution. And here you will find out that he has these kinds of ideas, and he was an idealist, that he was believing in the ideas like that mankind can be made perfect, and tyranny, anarchy, all these kinds of issues or ills of the society may be abolished, and freedom can flourish in all walks of life. He has hardly any equal competition as a lyric singer, by the way. And the main theme of much of his work is that when tyranny and suffering are eliminated from this world and reason and love are given importance, then the soul of the universe and the spirit of love would be revealed. So this is the theme of his most ambitious work, that is Prometheus Unbound. And Prometheus Unbound is an epic-like poem, a huge poem, by the way, published in 1818 to 1819. Shelley, like Blake, was a poet of prophecy and of vision. And Ode to the West Wind is one of his most important poems, where he concludes with the prophecy: if winter comes, can spring be far behind? And this particular prophecy is one of the most oft quoted expressions in the history of English literature, we can say. And there are there are some of the lines that I would like to recite to you from Ode to the West Wind, and the last one to two stanzas are quite important. So here I would like to recite a few lines. For example, as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need, oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. So this particular life is full of miseries, is full of sorrows. That is why he is requesting the west wind to lift him like a leaf, like a cloud, like a wave, so that he will be what? Getting relief from this particular thorns of life that are there in the society, present society, or a society of the romantic age. He was living in. All right. Similarly, if you look at the stanza fifth, that is the last stanza of the poem, "Ode to the West Wind," he is requesting again to the west wind, "Make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone, sweet thou in sadness. Be thou, spirit fierce, my spirit, be thou me, impetuous one. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth, and by the incantation of this verse, scatter as from an unextinguished hearth ashes and sparks my words among mankind. Be through my lips to unawakened earth the trumpet of a prophecy. O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind?" So, in this expression, "if winter comes, can spring be far behind," this is all about a positive kind of note that Shelley is ending the poem with. So he is trying to end this particular poem on a positive note. And this positive note is, for example, "if winter comes, can spring be far behind?" means spring is considered to be one of the pleasant seasons in the Western world. And winter is quite harsh for them because this is quite severe. And if winter comes, the spring cannot be far behind. The meaning of which is winter is full of sorrows, winter is full of miseries, and spring is full of pleasantness, pleasures. That is why he has talked about these two seasons in this way. So these two seasons are symbols of two opposite ideas. And as you know, that Shelley was himself quite an idealist, and that is why he wanted the tyrannies, the anarchies in the society to be abolished. And in almost all of his poems and works, he has talked about this kind of his vision or idea. Adonis is another pastoral elegy published in 1821, written in Spenserian stanza on the death of Keats. So, this is an elegy which is dedicated to the former poet, that is John Keats. So, genius like that of Keats, unfortunately, is misunderstood, and the critics hated Keats, and that killed him. So, Adonais is regarded as one of the two or three great elegies in English. Like Wordsworth, Shelley spent a good deal of time contemplating the natural phenomena. He believed that nature was the outward manifestation of the inner and divine beauty, according to Shelley. Nature is nature is an outward manifestation of the inner and divine beauty, according to Shelley. And he called the inner reality light and beauty of sustaining love, and he tried to identify himself with this. Shelley was fascinated with clouds, wind, waterfalls, and such other natural phenomena. They became symbols of great significance to him. The cloud represents the cyclic mutation of water, and it also symbolizes mutability and permanence inherent in the human heart and in the human spirit. Light and sound actually attracted him, and he found music everywhere. In fact, he heard a vast universal symphony, and his own aspirations and his own poetic fervor are like the skylark which soars above, scanning the ground, and the music of the skylark's song would inspire, like such harmonious madness from my lips would flow, the world should listen then. Shelley's A Defense of Poetry, as I told you already, as I mentioned you already, was written as a response to Thomas Love Peacock's work, that is, The Four Ages of Poetry, and also supplements Wordsworth's preface to lyrical ballads. Shelley's Platonic ideas find expression in the defense of poetry. And he says that the poet reveals the phenomenon, the phenomenal world to mankind. And the word poet, as used by Shelley, includes all artists and even philosophers. And the artist is a superior being Art improves imagination, and so it is useful. And Shelley asserts in the defense of poetry that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world, in the defense of poetry. Hmm. This one is quite important, by the way. By Shelley, huh? Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. This is a quotation which is often used in English literature and theory and criticism as well. Moving on to John Keats. John Keats' era is from 1795 to 1821. And we'll find out that among the Romantic poets, John Keats' dedication to poetry was total overall. Wordsworth and Coleridge were both interested in philosophy, which actually deflected their attention. And Blake's didactic intention colored much of his work. Byron moved away from poetry to active participation in the liberation of Greece, and Shelley's poetry and political beliefs were closely linked. But Keats strove hard throughout his brief career to achieve the essence of poetry. On first looking into Champion's Homer, written in his 21st year, may be called his poetic efflorescence. In Sleep and Poetry, he spoke of his poetic aspirations and his dedication to poetry. He also has written Endymion, and it was written to actually compete with Shelley in writing a long poem. Hmm. And Hyperion was an ambitious venture, uh, uh, and that can be related to Paradise Lost. Keats, John Milton's Paradise Lost, I'm talking about. So Keats wrote his most important poems in a period of 9 months, January to September 1819. And these are, for example, The Eve of St. Agnes, La Belle Dame, Sans Mercy. These are some of the odes that Shelley has penned. Okay. Keats presents all experience as a mass of inseparable and irreconcilable opposites. Like melancholy dwells with beauty, and the dividing line between love and death is thin. And he believes that the great end of poetry is that it should be a friend to soothe the cares and lift the thoughts of man. And this is by Keats. All right. This is also quite important, by the way. Okay. Keats' letters are an indispensable accompaniment to his poetry, and they contain some of his germinal ideas, such as negative capability. So, this is the theory of negative capability. And in a letter to his brothers, he says, "The excellence of every art in its intensity, capable of making all disagreeable evaporate from their being in close relationship with beauty and truth." So he sent some letters where he actually mentions all about this negative capability as well. And his letters also show his concern for suffering and evil in the world. So he does not accept traditional philosophy or institutional religion as an adequate palliative for the complexity and contradictions of experience. Not many poets, including Shakespeare and Milton, could write such distinguished poetry at the age of 24, when Keats' poetic career practically came to an end. So Keats published 54 poems in his lifetime. Another 96 works were published posthumously, and his letters number around 300. And this is an unmatched achievement within a short period of 3 years. So Keats attempted a variety of poetic forms: romance in Hyperion, and The Eve of St. Agnes, epic in Hyperion. And he wrote different kinds of lyrics, by the way, like Hymn to Pan, the ballad in La Belle Dame, Sans Mercy. The sonnet in On First Looking into Chapman's Homer, and in the famous odes. For example, Lamia. Lamia was composed in heroic couplets in the manner of Dryden, and the pre-Raphaelite movement owes its origin to Keats's La Belle Dame Sans Mercy. So Browning, Tennyson, Hopkins, and Yeats have also acknowledged their indebtedness to Keats because of his achievement as a poet and his wide-ranging and ever-growing influence. Keats deserves to be called the poet's poet, an appellation Charles Lamb gave Edmund Spenser in a different context. So here we can say that Keats deserves to be called the poet's poet. And this particular appreciation was given by Charles Lamb to Edmund Spenser once. Now we'll move on to next unit, that is George Crabbe's The Village, Book 1. The Village was published in 1783, and it's a narrative poem following on the footsteps of 18th century Augustan typographical poetry. And the 18th century was replete with poetry, and which celebrated the rural English countryside as the epitome of pristine beauty. And they amalgamated elements of the pastoral and Georgics to picture the rural landscape and living as humanity's ideal goal. Georgics are chiefly described specifically named actual localities, but in the 18th century, along with describing the natural scenery, they usually also gave information about specific rural subject matters, giving genre sketches and brief histories of the resident people and their livelihood. Unlike most of the 18th century typographical poetry, Crabbe does not name the village on which his poem is based. So we would have accepted the location as Crabbe's fictitious construction, but for his son, who, being a biographer, described his father's birthplace, Aldborough, Suffolk, by quoting lines from the poem. And the geographical location is further substantiated with topographical details, and we can vouch for the actual locality being indeed Aldborough. And the genre sketches of the people, their professions and habits, along with the prevalent village vices and poverty, go on to give a realistic depiction and help to generate a concrete image of the place and its society. Crabbe was born in this impoverished seacoast village and detested his mean surroundings and dull occupations. He escaped to London and sought help from Edmund Burke, an established and reputed intellectual and statesman at the time. Edmund Burke was also a poet, by the way. On reading Crabbe's literary creations, Burke recommended him to James Dodley, who eventually published Crabbe's first set of poems called The Library in 1781. And Burke also helped him get accepted for ordination. In 1782, Crabbe became chaplain to the Duke of Rutland at Belvoir Castle. In his book one of The Village, Burke utilizes detailed observation to delineate the bleak surroundings of the village of his birth. The primary purpose of this poem is to communicate to urban readers the real hardships and harshness existing in rural living, admonishing or living up, giving up the folly of the city bred who tend to believe that rural life is pristine and harmonious, devoid of corrupt influences of the city, by the way. And Crabbe punctures the rural-urban binary, which constructs the rural as sublime and in turn engages the reader in reverse optics, awakening them to the harsh realities of life in the village. As he says, I paint, the truth will paint it. I paint the court as truth will paint it, and as bards will not. B-A-R-D. Bard means Bard means poet. Okay, now the book 2 continues the theme of book 1 over 100 lines, after which it deviates into a memorial eulogy of Lord Robert Manners, the brother of Crabbe's patron, the Duke of Rutland. And Crabbe was befriended by many poets over a period of time, ranging from Samuel Johnson to Sir Walter Scott. Johnson is also said to have made minor changes in parts of this poem. What is interesting in this poem is that there is an elaborate discussion and demonstration of how rural poverty is mystified and posited with picturesque quality in cultural productions of the time. Not only is this apparent in poetry and literature, but the phenomenon is widely rampant and amply visible in British landscape, art, and theatrical pastorals in the 18th century. as villages transited from being distinct bioregions to being integrated within the frame of a national territory of Great Britain, there evolved a radical change in the depiction of country life in both art and poetry. And the category of the rural poor began to be of much interest. One second. Huh? Okay. All right. So you see, the category of the rural poor began to be of much interest in most cultural productions of the time. Famous painters of the time, like for example, we had Thomas Gainsborough, George Moreland, and John Constable, represented the rural poor in a way so as to naturalize them and make them acceptable, sometimes as decor in the salons and drawing rooms of the rich. So, village life was depicted in terms of repose and restfulness, which erased the reality of physical hardship and the daily struggle for survival. In this sense, Crabbe's The Village is a rare and different kind of poem, as it dismantles and exposes the concerted efforts to construct the myth of rural poise, by the way. And Crabbe's early life and upbringing grants authenticity to his criticism of the widespread dishonesty in the depiction of country life and makes it a credible voice of dissent. Hmm. All right. So, so Krabbe gives a brief description of the village in the village of the village life in the village. And the lines are like, let me read out these lines for you. The village life and every care that reigns over youthful peasants and declining swines. What labor yields, and what the labor past age in its hour of languor finds at last. What forms the real picture of the poor demands a song the muse can give no more. Flat are those times, if ever such times were seen, when rustic poets praised their native green. No shepherds now in smooth alternate verse, their country's beauty or their names rehearse. Yet, still for these we frame the tender strain, still in our lays fond corindons complain, and shepherds' boys their amorous pains reveal, the only pains, Alice, they never feel. On Minchio's banks, in Caesar's bounteous reign, if Tityrus found the golden age again, must sleepy birds the flattering dream prolong. Mechanic echoes of the Mantuan song, from truth and nature shall we widely stray, where Virgil, not where fancy leads the way. Yes, thus the muses sing of happy swains, because the muses never knew their pains. They boast their peasants' pipes, but peasants now resign their pipes and plot behind the plough. And few amid the rural tribe have time to number syllables and play with rhyme. Safe, honest duck, what son of verse could share? The poet's rapture and the peasant's care, or the great labors of the field degrade with the new peril of a poorer trade. From one chief cause these idle praises bring, that theme so easy few forbid to sing. They ask no thought, require no deep design, but swell the song and liquefy the line. The gentle lover takes the rural strain, a nymph, his mistress, and himself a swain. With no sad scenes, he clouds his tuneful prayer, but all to look like her is painted fair. I granted indeed that fields and flocks have charms for him that gazes or for him that farms. But when amid such pleasing scenes I trace the poor laborious natives of the place, and see the midday sun with fervid ray on their bare heads and dewy temples play, while some with feebler heads and fainter hearts deplore their fortune, yet sustain their parts, then shall I dare these real ills to hide in tinsel stapperings of poetic pride, no cast by fortune or on a frowning coast, which can no groves nor happy valleys boast, where other cares than those the muse relates, and other shepherds dwell with other mates. By such examples taught, I paint the court, as truth will paint it, and as bards will not. Nor you, ye poor of lettered scorn, complain. To you the smoothest song is smooth in vain, overcome by labor and bowed down by time. Feel you the barren flattery of a rhyme? Can poet soothe you when you pine for bread by winding myrtles round your ruined shed? Can their light tales your weighty griefs overpower, or glad with airy mirth the toilsome hour? Lo, where the heath with withering brake grown over lends the light turf that warms the neighboring pool. From thence a length of burning and appears where the thin harvest waves its withered ears. Rank weeds that every art and care defy reign over the land and drop the blighted rye. Their thistles stretch their prickly arms afar, and to the wrecked infant threatened war. Their poppies nodding mock the hope of toil. There the blue boggles paints the sterile soil. Hardy and high above the slender shaft, the slimy mallow waves her silky leaf. So it's a very long poem, okay, and I cannot actually read the full one. So I have read around 30 to 40 lines, by the way. Okay, so the section one of this particular poem actually is all about a poetic imagination. And Krabbe begins the book one of his poem by clearly identifying his intentions and reasons of writing the poetry, for which surely the muse of yesteryears or the gentle fancy of conventional poetry is clearly not effective enough. And he is all set to describe the life of the country poor, the hard labor, and the worries of young peasants. Like in these lines, as I mentioned you, in these lines like the village life and every care that reigns over youthful peasants and declining swains, what labor yields and what that labor past, age in its hour of labor finds at last, what form the real picture of the poor, demand a song the muse can give no more. Okay, so in his second stanza you see he continues to disparage pastoral poetry and categorically states that the golden age of pastoral poetry is long past and it is right now over. In these lines, for example, fled are those times when in harmonious strains, when rustic poets praised his native plains. As already stated above, as I told you now, Krabbe's account of rural life has been seen as a response to Oliver Goldsmith's deserted village, and therefore frames his broader attack on Virgilian pastorals. So Oliver Goldsmith has actually deserted the village life, country life. So this is a kind of back to nature kind of claim that we can find in George Crabbe's work, that is The Village. So on the one hand, we have Oliver Goldsmith, who does not like the village in a way, that we can find it from Deserted Village, that is another poem of Oliver Goldsmith. And here we have George Crabbe, who likes the village life, by the way. And George Crabbe's poetry can also be seen as an extended critique of the limitations of romantic ideology. So we can find The romantic ideology is limited to this nature and all. So Crabbe claims to give a realistic description of the lives of the poor that Goldsmith did not, because he does not like the rural life in a way. So, in contrast to Goldsmith, Crabbe describes the situation of the agricultural poor in painstaking detail. So, early critics of Crabbe maintain that the two are quite opposite in nature, quite contradictory in nature, and that among the two writers, Crabbe is the more realistic, whereas on the other hand, we have Goldsmith, who is more poetic. So, Crabbe is realistic, Goldsmith is poetic. Though written in a Georgic style or mode, it adhered more to the realistic poetic style of the 18th century, emanating from Ambrose Phillips' Eclogues and John Scott of Amwell's Moral Eclogues. On, for example, these lines, for example, on Mincio's banks, Caesar's beauteous reign. If Tityrus found the golden age again, must sleepy bards the nettering dream prolong. Mechanic echoes of the Montuan song, from truth and nature shall we widely stray, by Virgil, not where fancy leads the way. So here you will find out that the romantic poet, that the romantic imaginary situation constructs the countryside and its accompanying rural life as a safe haven full of simplicity, devoid of troubles, only reveals the inexperience and ignorance of poets who probably were born and bred in the city and know little about villages. Yes, thus the muses sing of happy swains because the muses never know their pains. And these are the lines from the village. Why did you leave, Rajkumari? आज ଟିକେ বেশি বক বক ହେଇଗଲା କି ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ପଢୁଛନ୍ତି ପିଲାମାନେ ଆଚ୍ଛା ରାଜକୁମାରୀ again is coming ଆଚ୍ଛା ଆଜି ତ ଦୁଇ ତିନି ଜଣ ଆସିନାହାନ୍ତି ବୋଧେ ପିଲାମାନେ ପୁଅମାନେ ଆସିନାହାନ୍ତି ବୋଧେ ନାଇଁ
ପୁଅ ଜଣେ ତ ସାର୍ ବହିଟା ଅଛି
ଜଣେ ଆଚ୍ଛା ଆଚ୍ଛା ନଅ ଜଣ 10 ଜଣ ଅଛନ୍ତି କେତେ 9 8 ଜଣ Okay. So there were attempts to erase and silence unhappy dissenting voices and vices existing in the rural neighborhoods by sweeping them beneath the rosy carpet, by the way. And for example, we have painted fair of scenic beatitude, which politically symbolized the harmonious unity of the British nation in the 18th century. In that sense, Crabbe's poems are more rational because these are resistive in nature amidst a homogeneous cultural construction of rural life as idyllic and ideal described by Goldsmith. So Crabbe even suggests the relative lack of leisure and free time among the villagers who are compelled to plod and do hard labor under hostile conditions to make their living. Their daily fight for survival is also there, finding its place. So this has taken away from them not only their own local and indigenous poetry and songs, but also caused widespread illiteracy, unleashing on them a life of penury and daily struggle. So such a rosy and harmonious picture is but banal, and Crabbe denounces poetry which lacks the spine to portray reality with its accompanying dark sides. So on the one hand, we have Crabbe, who is more realistic, who likes to portray different real issues, unlike Oliver Goldsmith. Okay. And here we have, for example, he chastises such poetry as being hypocritical and dishonest, which poetry does not portray the real life issues. Okay, so the poems that project real life issues are liked by George Crabbe. On the other hand, he does not like the poems that do not portray the real life issues. All right. The description of Minotti is here. You see, Krabi's denial to grant any aspect of the lives of the poor symbolic or metaphoric status. It traps the rural population in a world of concreteness or realistic world, and therefore there is an absence. There is an absence of elevation. Although he describes serious social problems, uh, he presents a world within which this can neither be addressed nor be redressed. Hmm. Okay. All right. Now we'll move on to second section of this particular poem, and here we will find out that there are a series of images that are presented by Krabe, and these images present are rural landscape and the topography of that area. So Krabe evidently finds the mystification of rural poverty as highly objectionable and therefore wants to portray the truth as poets do not, as truth will paint it and bards will not. He mentioned here in this second section of the poem. So the topography likewise is not presented as salubrious or in the picturesque method abundant with green pastures and rambling valleys like Wordsworth will paint it through the poems like Tinton Abbey or through the poems like the Solitary Reaper and all. So here we have a frowning coast, which neither groves nor happy valleys boast. So here we find the hard, real life description of these natural manifestations, which other poets do not do that, by the way. So here, instead of the usual pretty village scene, one can find the poor overcome by labor and bowed down by time. This is one of the most important lines, by the way. The poor is overcome by this is the line, overcome by labor and bowed down by time. So the poor people are overcome by labor and they are bowed down by time, and this triggers his lament or his condolences for the futility of poetry, its absolute failure to redress the evil in the society which the place and its people are trapped with. The hollow salutations prove to be predatory, like parasite, lacking in activism or revolutionary zeal, and can also be seen as insulting and making a mockery of the village's misery. And poetry, which falsely beautifies the surroundings and the general life of the rural poor, can do nothing to improve and uplift the dreadful living conditions of the real people. So he wanted a poem which should address and redress the social issues that were there at that point of time during the Romantic age. Like Shelley also did have this kind of an idea, but his presentations were more romantic, more imaginary than real. Okay, so here we find a poet that is, here we have George Crabbe, who presents more realistic situations of the natural manifestations. So much of the 18th century topographical and poetry presents a landscape which is quintessentially or exemplary in nature and tamed as pleasant and uh, salubrious. So the wilder aspects of landscapes are never addressed. So those winding vegetation which may seem picturesque in poetic terms may in fact be harmful and counterproductive for farming and crops, by the way. So these wild creepers, okay, they may be quite harmful, right? And that harmful effect of these natural manifestations have not been projected by any other poet except this particular poet here we have, that is George Crabbe. 1 second. Okay. Got a second. Okay. All right, so the geography is symptomatic of the widespread deprivation that persists in the village. And we have chaos, anarchy, corruption, drunkenness. These are some of the characteristics of the village population or rustic population that is residing in the village. Krabe takes great objection to unruliness, random acts of crime, and rampant disorder, and the general state of misdirection that are as much visible as the pathless waste that makes for the crude landscape of the region. So he also mourns the demise of popular village sports and matches in with which the village youth actively participated in after they were done for the day, demonstrating physical labor and chivalry. Krabbe sees this erstwhile lifestyle gradually getting replaced by meaningless labor as the coastal village gets embroiled in a new vicious circulation concerning trade, cargo, and transport. Uh, it becomes a self defeating and relentless process of carrying and securing safe transit of cargo overseas and by land. There also ensue uh, accompanied vices of smuggling, burglary, and piracy. Protecting oneself from some such vices become routine responses, just as falling prey to this become inevitable. In the next section, you see the poet puts himself in the midst of the village to contemplate about the vices that abound there. All of these are, of course, artificial and human inflicted, so much so that pure nature is completely and irretrievably altered or modified, we can say. So he gives a socio-economic analysis as he studies in depth the occupational demographics of the place. He notes how fishing, which was steadily evolving as an industry, replaced other occupations and provided employment to the villagers who were earlier engaged in activities which were more organic and natural. And right now, I mean, these have been turned into artificial kinds of habits. So he obviously does not have a good impression about fishing, which he clearly sees as mercenary and savage. After giving reasons for the region's downward slide, it returns to his own predicament, drawing an analogy with the swallows at the seacoast, waiting for favorable wind to escape to more hospitable lands. In the same way, he says he was waiting for an opportune moment for an escape from the claustrophobic life. Claustrophobia means claustrophobia,
Sorry, sir.
the fear of being confined to a small place. This is claustrophobia. बहुत लोक अछंती जो माने डरंती हैला गोटे छोटिया रूम गोटे छोटिया जगह भितर रहले ताको डर लागे हैला ताको सफोकेटेड फील हुए सो क्लॉस्ट्रोफोबिया मींस द फियर ऑफ बीइंग कन्फाइंड एस लगी जाईची हैला confined 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 to a small place okay so we will stop here right and we will move on to unit 3 for some later classes and we will move on to a tale of two cities now आमे केते पढ़िथिले टेल ऑफ टू सिटीज को आमे आरो लिंक को जिबा हला आमे आरो लिंक को जिबा आरो लिंक ता तुमको देइथिली काली नहीं काली देइथिली ना से लिंक को जाओ दिस इज द लिंक এটা হচ্ছে সে লিংক এই লিংক को जाओ